and welcome to Spooky Middle Grade YouTube. We are excited to be joined this evening by David, Neilsen, and friends. And we're going to, yes, tip the hat, we're going to be talking all things spooky, Halloween, and of course about David's brand new book. But first of all, hold that baby up. First of all, though, let's find out who's here. So why don't we go around and introduce ourselves, and we'll start with Erin.
Oh, fantastic. So hi, everybody. My name is Erin Petty. I'm a writer who lives in New England. I love the spooky season, of course. And I'm the author of the Thelma B series. So this is the first book, The Peculiar Haunting of Thelma B. And we'll be releasing the second book next year. And that's me.
Awesome. And what about Ash?
Hi, I'm Ashfiel Nadarlu, and I am the author of Cattywampus, which came out in 2020, and also the author of Ghost Story, A Touch of Ruckus, which just came out about a month ago. And I'm so excited to be here and talk with David.
Yes, I'm also excited, and I'm Kim Ventrola, author of various books, author of some book babies, there they are, and I'm very excited to be here today and talk to David. But David, first of all, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about your spooky self and spooky happenings that are going on this month, and then tell us a little bit about your new book.
Okay. Well, hello. My name is David Neilsen. I am the author of Dr. Fell and the Playground of Doom and Beyond the Doors. And then the book that just came out that we're really excited about, which is Lillian Lovecraft and the Harmless Horrors. I live in Sleepy Hollow, New York. I am a storyteller. So October is, my high holy days. I am busy throughout the entire month telling stories, doing ghost tours. I have events at Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. I've done things at Washington Irving's home of Sunnyside, and National Botanical Gardens, all sorts of places like that. The Rockefeller Preserve. It's just all about telling stories, telling the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Of course, if I didn't tell that, they'd kick me out, and other things like that. So my new book, which is Lillian Lovecraft and the Harmless Horrors, is a work of love for me. It's a story that I've been in love with for a very long time, and I finally went ahead and put it out there. It's the story of Lillian Lovecraft, who a young girl who accidentally becomes haunted by a horrific demon from beyond time and space named Frank. And Frank basically eats mustard and plays with people's toupees, and he's really obnoxious. But his arrival portends the arrival of many other horrific creatures from even worse things and dangerous from other realms. And then a demented genius is trying to open a portal into Frank's realm that will bring forth a giant eyeball who will devour humanity. So it's up to Lillian, her friends, and Frank, if he feels like it, to try and save the day. And that's Lillian Lovecraft and the Harmless Horrors. And I'm really excited to be here and be a part of this because it's spooky middle grade rocks.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. And of course, we all know from the name of your book, Lillian Lovecraft and the Harmless Horrors, there's going to be some like Lovecraftian style that people can expect, right? And you really embrace that kind of language. So tell us about like the inspiration for this character.
Well, Lillian Lovecraft has been a character that I loved. The book actually started from a title. A few years ago, I did a series of storytelling, Halloween storytelling for little kids that we called Harmless Halloween Horrors. And I loved the way that sounded. And then I loved the idea of the Harmless Horrors. And that started becoming an entire story to me, but I needed a character. And I'm a fan of Lovecraft, his work at least, and I've always liked the idea of doing something. My work has Lovecraftian elements in it, but I want to just go out there, and so why not basically try to make what is a Lovecraft book for kids, but not nearly as. It's really it's much more comedy than it is horror, but there's certainly elements in there. certainly Lovecraftian elements. That's why I gave her the name. There's no mention that she's related to anyone, anything like that. It's just to get you in the mood and the mindset of what you can expect. And I let my imagination go wild with some of the horrors that I got to create. It was just so much fun pulling things out of their hat. And it's like, okay, now this thing has 12 noses and this is an evil clown, and whatever, what it's come together with. But that's where all that came from. And that's why it's got a lot of Lovecraftian influence.
Well, there always has to be an evil clown in every story, right? Erin, do you have an evil clown in The Haunting of Thelma B?
I don't. And now I feel like I got to go back to the presses.
Yeah.
Another printing. There's something really scary about an evil clown. I don't know. That chills me to the bone.
There is, right? And so, David, of course, you have this combination of the wacky, like over the top humor and all of these wild monsters, and then some really like scary elements. So you seem to always kind of combine horror and humor in all of your books. Is that something you think you'll continue with everything you write, or do you ever see yourself just doing like the deep and serious, like, psychological horror?
There's a split personality, because all my work I do for kids is always going to have that humor in there. That's what I was first and foremost, was a comic. I write comedy, but there's a dark side of me, and I do write short stories that are straight horror that aren't funny at all. They're just horrific. And so that's when I've been working on my middle grade stuff and I'm having a great time, and I just feel this thing building inside me. Must be evil. So I quickly write something horrifically terrible for adults and put that aside and sell that to somebody, some short story, and move on back to the fun stuff, just to get out of my system, get the darkness out, purge it, coming out of there. So yeah, but my kid stuff is always going to have humor in it. It's just, I can't live without it.
Well, it's good to know I'm not the only one with that, angry voice in my head that just comes out, something just like bursts from my chest cavity, alien style on occasion. It happens. So, so I'm not alone, but I have like 1,000 burning questions for David, but I do want to open the floor to our spooky friends. So Erin or Ash, do you have a question for David?
I would love to hop in just because I read that the name of your town is Grotesque Gulch. Is that correct?
Yes, Grotesque Gulch.
I am in love with that. And I'm wondering, I mean, you're from a very famous town. Are there inspirations that are from or is Grotesque Gulch a thing unto itself?
It is a thing unto itself. I love the name, of alliteration, and it sounded like the right place. It kind of came up when I hit it. I was like, that's it. That's where this place takes place. And it is I slowly but surely, and the other, because I'm trying to write a sequel, and there'll be other books in the series, you defining the area and the place. It starts out at the Grotesque Gulch Public Library used book sale and pie eating contest, and that's modeled straight after. I'm a trustee of our local Warner Library here in Cherrytown, Sleepy Hollow, and that comes straight out of our book sales. They're not pie eating contests, but I thought it had to be something else to add it. But I have pieces of, like, I have parks. I have one park in there, I think Shutterson Park, and I model that off of Patriots Park that's here in Sleepy Hollow, Terrytown. So I do model elements of the book, but the place itself, Grotesque Gulch, is its own thing, definitely.
I love it. Well, and Ash, you have a town that appears in both of your books, right? But they're not part of a series. And, like Stephen King likes to do that. So maybe this was a trend. I don't know.
I love that. Well, I had a question. So I know that you were talking about how you're this book is inspired by Lovecraft, and you have like a lot of Lovecraftian horror in there, but also a lot of humor. And both of my books have like both horror elements, but like humor is heavily threaded throughout. I was wondering if you had any like humor influences that influence the type of humor that you put in your book, or maybe influences of people who kind of seamlessly blend both horror and humor. Is this just like a fusion that you came up with on your own?
Well, I think there's no particular people that in my mind that I model my stuff after, or that I think of that. The humor. It's funny. Right before we're doing this, I was watching an episode of Monty Python with my son. Tells you some, we watch Monty Python. I love some of the Mel Brooks stuff. I did Young Frankenstein a while back and just loved doing that and that whole comedic timing. So, some of the Borscht Belt comics and stuff. But a lot of it is just, I did comedy for so long. I was an improv comic for a while. I did that throughout college and a little bit after. And then I teach improv comedy to children. And when I started writing horror, my mom was like, "What? You're writing what?" I was like, "Yeah, it's great." Yeah, because before I started writing books, I was doing screenplays for Hollywood, trying to. I got one produced that was terrible, and I dare anyone to rent it. But I was writing horror, trying to write horror. But that was a series of mistakes, though. But I didn't get to write much comedy. But when I get to put the comedy in the books, the fusion just seems natural. I was thinking about I was just seeing something, and it was I wish my brain is gone. It'll come to me. But there was a series that had that element of just comedy. Well, actually, in some ways, Marvel does that. I was thinking about that, of some stuff, how Marvel plays their normal action superhero stuff, and then like, wouldn't it be funny if this happened? And they do this one thing that's just bizarre and funny. And so this is horror, but you got to take it with a grain of salt. That's what my characters are always aware and having fun and laughing, making us laugh, hopefully.
I love that so much. Just to jump in, so I can't even remember. It might have even been a kid, like a reader, who like said this, and it just always resonated with me. It's like, you can make it like as scary as you want, but then you have to make it just as funny for like kids. Like, it's like, it could be kind of like not really scary and not really funny and just kind of like a straightforward story. But like, if you're going to add in like the scares, then you have to like measure it out. And I just always think about that. So when you're talking, that makes so much sense to me. Like, it's like, and if it's going to get really, really scary, you got to have something that's really, really funny in there. Yeah. I love that idea.
Yeah, that's so fun. Like, really funny or maybe really cozy. I feel like I balance it with like coziness sometimes, or just like literal, like they're eating cookies and like drinking hot chocolate or something. But yeah, that's so cool. I love, like, now I'm wondering what it was like when you were doing improv comedy. That would have been amazing. I'm like, did you grow like tentacles? Like, what was happening?
Oh, we did all sorts of things, whatever needed to happen. There are no rules with improv. It's one of the great things. And also one of the great things, and it has a lot in common with Monty Python, is that improv, you don't have to worry about how the sketch is going to end, because it's just going to be called at some point. We're just going to stop it at some point. So you're never trying to figure out how it ends. And Monty Python famously said they don't do endings. And if you watch it now, their skits don't end. They just sort of stop and something else starts, because there's no way to end something that works funny. So that's what our improv was like. Just keep going, and everything has to be bigger and bigger, and then see where it goes.
Yeah, that's cool. I was actually about to take an improv class right before the pandemic started. And then of course it got like canceled. But yeah, I love that, because I used to be like just a teensy bit into acting in high school and then never again. But I love that you're also like doing acting. And I have a friend who is also like a theater teacher and writes novels, and she'll sometimes do workshops on how like doing the theater has inspired her writing. So I'm wondering, like, do you think your experience as an actor has informed the way that you write?
My initial instinct is to say, of course, although I'm not sure. I am very open. I'm the guy that, I will go for the joke. I will be out there. And in my writings, it will, I push it to the same limit. Like, what would I do in that situation, or what would be funny if this happened? So I don't know if my acting has influenced my writing as much as just, my life has influenced my writing, and acting has been a big part of my life. My performances, during Halloween, during October, you get lots of ideas, all sort. In fact, this book came from an idea from a October program a few years back. So in that way, you could say absolutely, it did that. but in general, it's not, I wouldn't say anything specific. It's just life in general has been creating this this madness within me that must find its way out.
Yeah, I love that. Just we all write stories for a different reason, right? And sometimes you just have those stories that you need to get out. And you kind of mentioned that Lillian Lovecraft is going to be a series. And I think this is your first series that you're going to have published, right?
That's correct. This will be, well, yes and no. The second one is coming along, but in between, another 3-part series is probably going to come out because it's like pretty much written. And the second one, second Lillian Lovecraft is having some issues with getting a couple of plot points to work, and so I wanted to get, instead of waiting a long time to get something out, I'm going to try to get something out by the beginning of the year to keep the motion going with what I've got. So I think it's going to be the Chronicles of the Deadly Dead is going to come out, and that's a 3-part series at this point. It can be more, but it's 3-part to start.
Okay, nice. We love the Deadly Dead. I mean, I feel like I'm a fan of the Deadly Dead, but I haven't even read about them yet, so I'm excited. Let me turn it over to my friends here. I always like, I steal all the questions, so don't let me steal all the questions. I'll try to, but.
I love your questions, Kim. I love them. So I love going on ghost tours, and I love listening to storytellers and historic tours and like that. And I wonder, have you ever had anything like wild happen on one of your tours? Like, has there ever been like an especially memorable storytelling event, or like, because you're with the public,
right?
So you never know what's going to happen. Like, do you have any interesting stories from October's past?
You know, they've all gone pretty smoothly, and the audience has always been really appreciative in their work. You know, the ghost tour that I do specifically is a ghost tour of our local theater, the Tarrytown Music Hall, which is 130 some odd years old. And we brought in the Gotham Paranormal Society, and they came and spent a couple of nights in the theater to like really do some ghost hunting. And they sent us back some files. And so we play some of them, and getting some of this stuff in the files, you know, they have some pictures, and you're like, oh, that's like a reflection. You realize they want to see stuff, so they're like, this is something, you know, that's the reflection of that light over there. But there were a couple of things, especially in the audio, that we could not say anything about. They had this one bit where, and you hear them talking, they're kind of like chatting about something, and there's just this whistle, and they don't hear it. And it's right at a part where we know where they are in the theater, and it's a place where in the backstage, we're one of the few theaters that still use ropes to tie and everything, and all the knots are nautical knots, and that stems from the history of the West End in London, when all the backstage work was often done with off-duty sailors, and whistling became a way that they would whistle back and forth in the eaves to give direction. That's one of the superstitions. You don't whistle on the stage. That came out because if you whistle on stage, you might accidentally signal someone to lower something on top of you. So they're back there right where that happens, and someone whistles, and that was just like freaky. And there's another bit where they're talking, and you can just hear this girl going la la la, and there's no girl there. And we're like, you know, we listened to it again and again. So some of that stuff has been really cool with the ghost tour. And
that
we
is
play those out.
So awesome. And you're a very good storyteller. I was like, oh my God, what happens next?
Well, good.
And I never knew. Oh my goodness. I got to come to Sleepy Hollow and take one of your tours.
Oh, you got to come to Sleepy Hollow. Yeah.
Yes.
We do October like no one else does October, because it's our thing.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned before, I had other questions in my mind, but now this is the burning one. You mentioned before that this book is like loosely based on something that happened during your tours, or inspired by that, or one Halloween season where you live. Like, tell me more about that. I have to know.
It's the title that came from the harmless Halloween horrors that I
thought
did.
it was a giant
that's
eyeball.
right. Okay.
Yeah. It was that's how this came out of that.
Okay.
And then there was the time that my face was eaten off by a monster, but that's that was separate.
I mean, yeah, you could talk about that too. That would be fun.
No.
Yeah, I was like, I definitely want you to talk about the giant eyeball that was chasing you.
Yes.
And that was your inspiration.
Well, these are like my own horrors, my own fears and whatnot. That's the thing about when you're writing this stuff and I'm creating all kinds of monsters. Like, what would freak the heck out of me? Okay, here's this creature. Right, it goes up and then this thing.
It's too much. Okay, so here's another question for you. Like, since you improv and I imagine that you're constantly coming up with jokes, right? Like, so when I'm writing jokes, I have a hard time turning it off when I need to sometimes. Is that a problem that you have? Do you want to just kind of like draw out the dialogue and keep being funny ever?
I do. I have to go back and edit myself. It's like, oh, it's like I'm not doing a comedy routine. So cut this out, cut this out, cut this out. This is funny once.
Yeah.
You got to let it go. But yeah, my earlier drafts are like filled with like just nonstop comedy, and I'll be like, oh, okay, back to the book now. Erase.
So when you're doing that, do you tend to do it like in the moment? Do you come up with your jokes like as you're writing, or do you
it comes up pretty much as I'm writing, as I'm putting it in there, and I just know this stuff's happening, and the conversation will flow. I know how it's going to flow.
Oh, that's great.
And it just the characters themselves have steer the conversation, steer the comedy. And then I have to rein them back because you guys aren't supposed to be funny now. You're about to die.
You're wrecking the tension.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool. I tend to find myself like when I'm in conversation with people, it's a little bit easier to be funny. Like talking like this, it's easier to like come up with jokes. So I'm impressed by anyone who could sit down and like have a conversation with themselves in their head and then be funny. That's impressive. I love that.
Well, not necessarily by myself in my head. I talk out loud. I'm by myself and I'll talk out loud.
Yeah.
But also, I'm used to having all sorts of conversations with myself, and I find myself very funny sometimes, and sometimes I find myself kind of a bit of a bore. I can be either way.
Yeah.
So it just comes out that I enjoy putting it in there, and I'll say it out loud, or I'll talk it out loud, or in my head the scene. It's like I'm seeing it like a movie, how it's happening in the movie right now, and that's the scene that goes on and on.
Yeah. Do you ever crack yourself up?
Oh yeah, plenty of times. I'm not good at holding like the stone faced in the midst of all the comedy. I was the guy in improv that would always break.
Yeah.
It became a thing. Sometimes they play games. Let's make David break, and it's pretty easy.
Which probably makes like brainstorming in the grocery store a little awkward sometimes. Like you're thinking of things you're gonna say, and then you're like,
I was, in my non-writing life, I deliver for FedEx, and I was in an apartment building today, and I'm trying to rewrite the end of the first book of The Deadly Dead, and I'm playing this ideas in my head, and I was in an elevator, and I started realizing I was talking out loud, and I had a couple of guys looking at me. Oh, I'm sorry. Because like, oh no, this won't work. I can do this. Okay, he says this. Okay, what happens? Oh, hi. Yes, no, this is for you.
Yeah, it's fine, guys. It's fine.
Yeah,
it's for reasons. Yeah, I love it.
I do that when I'm walking in the park sometimes because I'll be thinking of ideas, and I definitely have noticed myself just laughing out loud, like the funny things that was like the banter that I was thinking of in my head. I'm sure people are like, "What? What is this person doing?" But it's fine. We're writers. We like to talk.
I like to say, I'm not staring blankly into space. I'm writing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And you're creating these amazing characters. So tell us, because you have a lot of characters, and a lot of them are like very humorous and like larger than life. So tell us how you go about creating your humorous cast of characters so they can then have funny banter.
Well, one thing I do, I start with the realization that if I don't do anything, they're all going to sound like me. I am my voice. So I try to give them something about them. A friend of mine pointed out a while back in the movie Poltergeist. She pointed as an example of this. The dad in Poltergeist has this ridiculous hat that he always wears, and that becomes a piece of him. And he can be anything else, but he's the guy with that hat, and that singles him out. And so I try to give all my characters something about them that singles them out. And that works in. I have one character who, when he ever gets excited, he makes up words, and everyone's just used to that. And so he gets, oh God, that's so fizzizzle, you know, and you're like, okay, that means something. You know, I have other characters that do different things. I'm really interested in having my characters have something. I don't want any character that's just fill. If a character is just filler, there's no point for them there. So I have a principal that has to do some stuff. I need to have this principal, but it can't just be the principal. So now he's the really bad at public speaking principal. So whenever he talks, like, well, I think we should, and that became his thing. And so throughout, even when he's not public speaking, he's still doing that kind of a thing because that's his character. So I always try to give them one thing. My Maria is a welder, so she's always welding. That's her like stress thing. Is she welds this model of grotesque gulch called Mini Gulch out of aluminum that she's got in her garage, and so she's always wearing a welding mask, and she's on the cover with a welding mask there. That's Maria. So I'm always give them something that singles them out.
Yeah, I love that. I always wanted to weld.
I know very little about welding.
I can weld. I will.
You can weld? I've never welded, but
Do you weld knives and swords? Are you the sword thrower, Ash? Is that?
I throw knives, but I don't weld them. Like, my welding is so messy. I'm learning how to weld. I should say I'm learning to weld. Yeah. Did you have to research it, David, to put that into the book, or?
No. I mean, a little bit. I know what certain things were called. Make sure that I'm not like she's, whether she's an expert or not. I don't have to. She doesn't have to show that she's an expert in here. She's just doing things, and she's the girl with the welding mask and the thing on her back, the tank of oxygen or whatever.
That's so smart as a writer, though. I get lost down like rabbit holes of like trying to learn things because I feel like I need to learn too much. So I think it's probably really wise to just do a little.
Do you have a cat on your shoulder?
I do.
Because it just looks like I see this tail, and I'm like,
I do.
Maybe Ash has got some tails. I'm very tentacly.
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's the cutest little kitty. We have a black kitty as well. I think all writers should have a black kitty.
We just have one for Halloween. We'll get rid of him after Halloween. He's just a decoration.
Yeah.
Well, I have a black dog. Does that count? Yes.
That's close. She's black.
That's close, right? Well, I love it. So we have your amazing cast of characters. And what about when it comes to creating these like wild plots about like Frank and the mustard and like all the evil nefarious?
Frank is one of my favorite character I've ever created. Frank is I do his voice. He sounds a little like this. He's not happy. He don't want to do that. That's Frank. And but he's this horrible, horrific thing that you make me feel bad. I don't want to do that now. I want some mustard. Time for mustard now. And I love Frank and all of the creatures that I come up with, but most of them don't have full. They're creatures or set pieces. A few of them have some stuff. The eyeball certainly is its own character, absolutely, and it's a great. It can only speak when it's possessing other people. So I'll have other people, and then it goes into all caps. That's it speaking. It can have an argument with itself, because the person's arguing and then arguing out of the same mouth with himself, which I was hoping that would not get too confusing. And it actually, I think it works. No one's said anything about it being confusing. They know the all caps is the I. So that's been a lot of fun. But Frank is the little kid, the who wants to play. He doesn't think anything bad or wrong. He just wants to play, and if you like upset him, he's going to be pouty for a little bit. He's a little kid, and that's how I created his character, and it works brilliantly. Like I say when I'm pitching it, Frank, it's up to Lily and her friends, and Frank, if he feels like it, to save the day, because maybe Frank will help, maybe he won't. He knows how he's feeling, and you've been nice to him, or have you not been nice to him lately? What's he thinking? But that's where Frank and that's where all these crazy creatures come from. Is again, give them something, like any of my other characters. They all have something about them specific. Just some of them, it's a lot more than others.
Yeah, well, and I mean, of course, creating those complicated villains that believe they're the heroes of their own stories and stuff. That's always fun
Yes,
to do.
that's important. That's important. No villain ever thinks they're the villain. So, and my villains in Lovecraft, the eyeball is overall a great villain, but there are some sub villains, and they don't think they're villains necessarily. Specifically, the one Mad Genius certainly is up for his own thing and doesn't think he's wrong, but he again has his own piece. But every character, every villain, to be a good villain, has to believe that they're not the villain. They have to believe that what they're doing, even in a comic way. Dr. Mubenstern, who's the genius, makes sense. What he's trying to do and what he wants to do makes sense with the character, so it doesn't come out of nowhere. And that's important for any villain, I think.
Absolutely. I love how every time we record, these little gnats like come and find me. I think it's because I'm dead. I don't know.
It could be.
Yeah,
You got the skeletal hand.
I do. I'm slowly rotting away below here. Everything from here down is just bones. But yeah.
Well, Ash, everything down there's a cat. So
yeah. Ash is a cat. Aaron, ghost, obviously.
Yeah, and I have a unicorn back there too.
Yes,
We're
all about
creatures.
Unicorns. Right. I love it. Well, David, aren't you going to show off your like ghostly pets that you have around? Because
they're not here.
I'm
up in the attic. They're down getting petted down. They're already asleep. I have two cats, the black cat and the calico cat, and they're not up here. They don't want to have. They don't have anything to do with me. And if I picked one up to try to show them, they'd be like, "No, what are you doing? Don't touch me."
What?
So I envy you, Ash, that yours is like, I'll be in your lap for a while. Not mine.
He is by far the nicest cat we have. I have two orange cats that are demon possessed.
Okay.
This one's very nice. Yeah.
No.
He makes up for the other two.
Good.
He's their good shadow.
I love it. Well, David, this book is your third book that's out. So why don't you tell us a little bit how like working on Lillian has been different from your first two books? Like, have you evolved as a writer? Like, how's the experience been different for you?
I think I have evolved. I think it comes out, and as all the writers will know, it's the third book published, but I've written about 10 by now, and getting others published or doing what others whatever I can. So this one fits in earlier in that series, but it definitely, I learned things specifically when I did Beyond the Doors. When I did this baby, this was very complicated. Dr. Fell is a great, simple, straightforward, not even a mystery story, and it's great. Kids love it, and it's a lot of fun. But it's not that complicated. This got really complicated, and I learned a lot doing this one about plot, about character, because I made the brilliant decision that I have 4 main characters, that every other chapter would be one of the other characters' point of view, so it goes back and forth like this. And so the story has to keep going in one direction, even though different characters are leading it one by one. That got confusing. But I learned from that, so that though I don't do that with Lillian, the plot was able to put together a lot easier because of what I've learned on the other books. So I take what I learned from the other books. So it was a lot of plotting, and then a lot of work on characters. And I always make an effort. I try to tie my books together in some small way. So there's a character who makes a small appearance here, who is a big character in this one. This has a small appearance by Dr. Fell himself, shows up in Beyond the Doors. So they're all going to, it's like Stephen King. I have the Neilsen world, the Neilsen universe, and they're all sort of connected. It's a Marvel thing eventually, and they'll all come together, I'm sure, for an Avengers style grouping at some point. I don't know.
Wow, I love that. That's totally epic. I love that thing of putting little Easter eggs and connections in the books too. That's super fun. Have you all, Aaron or Ash, have you done some of that? Well, I know Ash has done some of that But Erin, you have the sequel that's coming out to
I
Thelma
do. So
B,
that's
right?
kind of like it's all it's all the same world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a sequel. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's how that works.
But actually, if I could ask a question, because this is the first one that you've released that's kind of with the intention of it being a series. I would love for you to talk a little bit about your ending for this book versus your ending, and not giving away anything, but the style of it. How is it different writing the ending to a book that you intend to be a series versus something that's definitely just a standalone?
Yeah. Because this is a continuing adventure of the main characters, but the main villain, the eyeball villain, is defeated while not being vanquished. The plot is foiled, but it's not like they got rid of him or say. So there has to be a victory, which there is. There's definitely a victory, and definitely a satisfying victory. But then there's also at the end, there's this bit, but there's still obviously questions, and there's still some stuff out there that's going to happen. My desire with Lillian Lovecraft and her friends are to be that they can come into different adventures that have parallel very little to do with themselves, but there's a small tie underneath all the time, that's building towards a larger and larger and larger story, even though the individual books, which do build on what happened, but this plot isn't necessarily going to be about this plot or this plot, but there are pieces that we learn here that are going to come to fruition here. They're going to happen here and happen here. That's tying. It's different from the Deadly Dead series, which is there's one story that I'm cutting in 3 parts, that has that, and it has to have climactic endings, even though it is specifically leading towards the next book, which is leading towards the next book. These you could conceivably read them out of order if you wanted to. You would lose a little something, but while Deadly Dead, if you picked up the second one, you hadn't read the first, you'd be a little like, I'm missing something, and you are. But you could read the second Lillian Lovecraft and be like, oh, this is a fun adventure. Oh, and it's fun, and keep going. That's kind of how I do it. Like when I did Dr. Fell, it's an ending. It's absolutely over. But then I put a little hint at the end that, but yeah, Dr. Fell's still around. But there are rules in there that he's not going to go there again. So a sequel can't have the same heroes actually for this. So if I do this, have the same villain, different heroes. This baby ends. There's no coming back to this. I ended this, and I'm very happy with how it ended. And I made sure that, it's like, but it made a ton of money. You have to write a sequel. Okay, I'll find a way. But there's no Beyond the Doors 2 in my head at this point in term. This was a one and done.
Yeah.
And that and it had a much more solid, there were no loose ends, so there are loose ends you just keep a few loose ends, and you can pull on for future books. That's kind of how I left it.
So did you find yourself leaving like extra room for like personal growth arc for each individual character? Because if you have a standalone, you're kind of like, well, the story is going to start out with a character here, and then they're going to like grow toward this realization. Did you have to think like in like mini jumps with the subsequent books that are coming? Is that something you kept in mind, kind of?
That's a really interesting question. Lillian Lovecraft, the story, I wouldn't necessarily say that a lot of the characters have necessarily growths beyond Lillian and Frank. And the book becomes a story of friendship, and what is friendship, and what do you sacrifice for friendship, and what makes a friend. And it's these two completely ill-suited people who formulate a friendship at the end. By the end, and that is their big growth that they work through, and that's what I did. I didn't give my secondary characters a whole lot of growth, in terms of personal thing, because they're there to support the main story that I'm trying to tell, which is really of Lillian and Frank, and their union. Well, not that union sounds wrong. Their friendship, putting it together, a human and horror, together against the world, but they actually do grow. I realize now as I'm thinking about the final battle, because in the second book, a couple of them are different because of what happened in the first book. So there is that. There is a sense of like growth in them, that's actually secondary, but they're all there. But the work was to make sure Lillian and Frank grow properly together, apart together, have their moments.
Yeah, I love that. And because I'm such a huge fan too of like episodic TV shows that go on forever, like I love that. Like I would love to write a really long series one day where you have that kind of like overarching series arc and then the more episodic like little mini arcs. That would be so fun. And because they can keep like growing in little bits like with each kind of episode. So I'm excited that you're writing a series or a couple of series now. That's going to be really fun. So tell us, you said that the Deadly Dead is going to be coming up next. So why don't you tell us, like, can you tell us when that's coming out, or is just, are you sure yet? Oh, you just muted yourself the opposite way.
Onto the Frozen thing.
Perfect. Yeah.
I think I'm hoping right now, my plan is to get the first book out in January or February. And then that's going to be the hardest to do, actually. And after that, the other two will probably come out about 3 months after each. So it'll probably take half a year or whatever to get them all out. And by then I should have the sequel, the second Lillian Lovecraft, ready, and I'll put that out probably by the end of the year, next year, 2022. So I'm hopefully, if all works well, I'll have 4 books in 2022. And that's winter, spring, summer, fall, or whatever.
One for every season. We all need a book for every season. That's all I want.
A book for every season.
It's a book for every season. So that's not too much. So Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the Deadly Dead? Are we talking zombies?
Oh, don't call them that.
Oh.
That just gets them upset. So Benedict Thornwood, normal high school student, and is thrust into the world where he learns the truth, which is sometimes people die and they just, if they die alone and no one takes care of them or disposes them, then they wake up like a week later and they're dead, but they can live a normal life. But they're not supposed to. So there's a dead hunter who joins the main character and gets in. There's this dead mastermind who's trying to put together a machine that will make that person lord of all the dead, and he'll have an army. But they're not zombies; they're regular people. They could be, in fact, a school teacher, a nurse. You're the little old lady in the garden next door. They just happen to be dead, and no one can tell, but he gets injected with this stuff that gives him the power to smell them. They smell bad. So instead of I see dead people, I smell dead people is his thing. So if he starts getting an area and something smells bad, he knows someone dead's around there. And he's going to be stuck with that all of his life. And he's like, oh, now he never needed to know that there were so many dead people all around pretending. The first line is the world would be a lot better if all the dead people would stop pretending they weren't dead. And it just kind of builds from there.
Why are you revealing all of my secrets? And also, why are you saying I smell?
Well, I haven't been injected, so I can't smell you.
Okay, thank you.
I know. You look normal to me.
Okay, thanks. That's good.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm really excited for that one. And I know we're just kind of like running out of time, but I want to give Aaron and Ash a chance to ask any final burning questions.
Oh, well, you've answered so many amazing questions. I'm so excited. I look at your 2022 in awe and in wonder, and I'm so excited to see.
Well, it hasn't happened yet.
Oh, you're manifesting it though right
Yes,
now.
I am.
We're making it happen. Do you have, for your books that are coming out next year, do you have ideas already about things like, the tone and like the art direction for the say it again,
The Chronicles of the Deadly Dead.
The Chronicles of the Deadly Dead. Do you have an idea for what that's like? And is it, the first line is spectacular. Is it funny too? Are we?
Oh yeah, of
in
course.
This?
It could not be. I do have artwork. No, I've got a friend of mine who's an artist who I'm talking with. I want him to take over. I want him to do the art for this book. I don't want him to do the sequel to Lillian. I want the original one because I loved what she did. So I want to keep the art the same, but I want to switch to him for this new series. And we're gonna have a meeting and talk about, some ideas. And because he's a completely different artist, so it'll look completely different. but in terms of tone, I mean, that book, those three books are actually the culmination of one really, really long book that I wrote when I didn't realize that middle grade books shouldn't be 120,000 words. And even so, cutting that up, and I wrote it in 3 acts. And Act 2 and 3 on their own work as a completely perfect book. Act 1 needs an ending because it has an ending as Act 1. We're moving on to Act 2. But for a book, that's my biggest thing right now, is figuring out how to add and change and what's the story so that I end Act 1 as a book. That's why I say Act 1 is going to be the hardest. Act 2 and 3 are pretty much written. Books 2 and 3 are pretty much done because they work solidly, beginning and one story, climax, ending, happy ending, whatever, bad ending, moving on. And the stakes build each time. But I got to work on the ending for book 1. That's something I'm still playing with. As for Lillian, I mean, I'm going to keep this. I hope to keep the same artist. Although, to be honest, I've contacted her and not heard back from her. So she might have moved on. She's in Poland. I met her on Instagram, and I like your stuff. Will you do my book? And she said okay. But I haven't heard from her since. So I'm hoping that I can get her to do this because I loved what she did for my first book. I think it looks fantastic, the cover. So I'm trying to get her to come back to do the sequel. But I've got a lot of time. I'm pushing it off until December. So hopefully within the next 7-8 months, I'll find her. And we'll get that going. And it'll be, I know the tone of Lillian. I know the tone of that book. So I know the tones of both of these series very well. So I'm not that worried about it.
Oh, that's awesome. My question was kind of already answered. I was going to ask you if you're a plotter or a pantser because I'm totally jealous of how prolific you are and your plans for this next coming year. But now I guess you kind of accidentally plotted 3 books.
I plotted 3 books. It was a question I put to the group. Is I have this book and I want to put it out. It's huge, and then it's like middle grade is supposed to be between 40 and 50,000, and this is literally 120 something thousand words, and it's epic. But it needs to be cut up, and it'll then each of them will be inflated a bit more. They'll end up all being about 45,000 words, 45 to 50,000. They'll be right around the sweet spot for middle grade. But
that's so excellent. That worked out well for you because I know a lot of people. A lot of middle grade writers have really big, like adult length novels, but it's so cool that worked out for you, that you were able to actually turn it into 3 books, because that doesn't work for everybody. Your style of writing kind of lends itself to that.
Yeah, this one, but it's because I made this 3-act, being an actor thing, a 3-act play. I did a 3-act book, and each book has each act has its own title, and that's going to be the title of that book now. And I realized that it just makes sense. Instead of throwing it all one big thing tome out there, we want a series. You want something that's going to keep people coming back and hopefully building on each other. So I have one right away, because I didn't have this, because the second Lillian, I was just having problems in the 3rd act, and it wasn't ready. It wasn't going to be ready in time. I need to do a lot of work on it. So
I'm so excited. I'm excited to read them and right back to back. It's good. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be an amazing year. I just threw my phone off the table as one does. And I just want to give a huge thank you to everyone, Aaron, Ash, and David, for joining us tonight. David, before we go, do you want to tell people where they can find you and your books online?
Well, all my books, of course, are on Amazon under my name, David Neilsen. It's right there, right there. Yes, it's pointing there. Or my website, which is david-neilsen.com. There'll be information for all the books there as well, david-neilsen.com. Or that's probably the best way. That, or as I said, they're on Amazon, they're ebooks, they're Kindle. Right now, you start with 90 days straight in Kindle, so it's not anywhere else yet, but then it'll start moving to other bookshops, and so forth. But right now it's all on Amazon.
Awesome. Well, we're going to head over right now and check them out. And thanks for joining us in your busy, spooky season. Of course, it's busy for all of us because we are spooky and possibly undead, and this is our big season, so we love it. But
We do.
Yeah, and if anyone out there is a teacher or a librarian and they would like to have some spooky authors join in your classroom just like this with 4 authors answering student questions, head over to spookymiddlegrade.com and you can learn how to schedule your free spooky school visit. So that's also really fun. I usually play us out with a little video, but I don't have a video for our upcoming book club yet, but we are reading at the end of this month A Touch of Ruckus by Ash Van Otterloo. Who knew?
Cool.
So we're really excited. So David, you'll just have to play us some ghostly sounds as we end our broadcast this evening.
Ooh.